Support is technically one of the strongest roles in the game to carry with, though it may not always feel that way because you're often at the mercy of how well your teammates play. How are you possibly supposed to carry when every other game your ADC is in the middle of the enemy jungle alone versus 5 people? While supporting other players can be frustrating at times, with proper macro, you can carry very consistently as a support, and we'll show you how. In this guide, we're going to cover every macro concept you need to know to climb to Diamond and even further beyond. We'll talk laning phase, roaming, early warding, how to get dragons, what you should do in the mid game, vision control, and finally, some more miscellaneous tips you need to know to get started. And after you master support macro, if you want to become a great support player as fast as possible, then head on over to skillcap.com. Our service is completely risk-free as you're kept safe with rank up insurance. If you don't significantly improve while actively using Skillcap, then you get your money back, no questions asked. You can learn more at the end of this guide or check us out with the link in the description. Alright, now let's teach you how to macro as support. Learning macro for any role begins with one crucial thing: wave control. As a support who doesn't farm, you may feel like this doesn't apply to you all that much, but it definitely does. Waves are the foundation for almost every decision you make in the early game. Roaming, trading, recalling, etc. are all affected by what the wave state currently is and predicting what it will look like in the future. You may not have direct control over the wave, and that's definitely your ADC's job. However, if you know what your ADC is doing or what they should be trying to accomplish, then you can actually help them achieve it. This is the #1 skill that most support players ignore. Let's put it like this: most supports don't bother to learn wave control, so if you took it upon yourself to learn, then every time you got into a laning phase, you'd immediately be at an advantage. You'd have 2 players trying their hardest to get a wave advantage over the other side versus just 1 player. And since waves are the foundation of every single decision in the early laning phase, that'll drastically increase your win rate over the long run. Of course, this isn't a wave control guide. If you want to learn more about that, then check out our courses or some of our other guides. That being said, let's talk about the most important things you'll want to try and do with the wave that you can immediately apply after watching this guide. What you ideally want to be doing with the wave in most cases will boil down to what type of support you're playing. For the sake of simplicity, we'll break things down into 2 categories: caster supports and engaged supports. For caster supports, you typically want to try to be aggressive on waves and to be pushing along with your ADC. Having the pushing wave gives you a ton of benefits that you get to play around as a caster in most matchups. For starters, most casters tend to have a skill shot they want to land. If you have the pushing wave, this gives you way more flexibility in your ability to move up and land it. Plus, your opponents will have less minions to hide behind, making it even easier to land. Notice how much emphasis this Morgana is placing on hitting the wave to build a minion lead in this lane versus a Lux support. She's even playing very aggressively to prevent the enemy Ezreal from being able to freely hit the wave. With the push lead now, look how much easier of a time Morgana is having. She's able to walk up very aggressively to look for bindings. Meanwhile, compare that to the enemy Lux. On the back foot in terms of wave control, she's not able to posture aggressively and is unable to make her own opportunities happen. There's also another big element to getting the minion lead and building big pushing waves as a caster. You tend to be very squishy and susceptible to all-ins. However, it is very difficult to engage into big waves early on, which can give you a massive buffer against ganks in 2v2 fights. This is a clear example of that happening. Janna and her Tristana have the bigger wave over Pyke and Sivir. They're winning lane until Skarner shows up to gank. Look how awkward this engage has to be, just because of Janna having the wave advantage. The enemy team chasing got creep blocked constantly and tanked a ton of minion damage to finish off Janna. All the while, Tristana was doing max DPS, which ended up turning a gank around very favorably. It's super important you keep this concept in mind whenever playing a caster support. If you're the one at a minion disadvantage, then the lane will feel infinitely harder than it should. Always try to help your ADC push, otherwise lanes can look like this, making it much harder to play. Now let's talk engage and other melee supports. Usually your goal will be to keep the wave towards your side of the lane. This gives you plenty of room to chase down and engage on your opponents. It's also important to thin the wave so that you can actually engage. As we just discussed, fighting into big waves is very troublesome as a melee champion. Luckily, you can manage this decently with your Relic Shield. However, we have to watch a ton of low elo supports make a very consistent mistake with their Relic Shield. Let's take a look. Here's an Alistar with his Sivir versus a squishy enemy lane. At level 2, take a look at the wave state. It's in the middle of the lane and the waves are about even. These are precisely the win conditions we just talked about. As a result, look how easily Alistar is able to go in and get a great engage off. Afterwards, take stock of what the lane looks like. Xerath and Ashe are a bit closer to their tower, but there's still room for Alistar to engage. Not only that, but the enemy wave isn't too big. It's perfect for Alistar to potentially find another knock-up combo. But for some reason, every low elo melee support feels compelled to try to last hit cannons as quickly as possible with their Relic Shield. This is a mistake we see all the time. This is why we mentioned you need to learn wave control. Sivir was actually managing the wave properly. She's slow pushing to give Alistar ample time to engage. But because Alistar killed the enemy cannon minions so fast, look at where Ashe and Xerath can stand. They're chilling when they should be completely screwed after what happened earlier. Look just how little pressure Alistar has this entire time. This is all because he pushed the wave too quickly, not playing into his own win condition. Let's compare that to a good support. Look how long Nautilus waits to hit this cannon. He knows that by keeping the wave here as long as possible, he's making Caitlyn and Karma's lives super miserable and they can never walk up. Okay, so those are the most important wave tactics you need to know. So now let's talk roaming. We completely understand how frustrating this topic can be. Everyone says that roaming is how you carry when you're a support, but when you do it, your ADC just dies the second you leave lane, right? We're going to compare roaming to something everyone can understand: driving a car. In the same way that you cannot guarantee that you'll never be in an accident when driving, you can't prevent your ADC from dying when you roam. That being said, the benefits of driving a car far outweigh the risks of getting into an accident, which is the same for roaming. The important part is taking the necessary precautions to mitigate the likelihood of a crash or its impact. This is done through seatbelts, driving under the speed limit, airbags, turn signals, etc. Back to League of Legends. The best times to roam are when you know your ADC is very unlikely to die. A simple example of this would be if you have a Tristana versus a Jinx and Sona. She'll probably be fine if you leave her alone for a bit. Of course, not every lane is that non-threatening. So the universal sign that you'll look for when deciding to roam is if the wave is pushing back into your ADC. Technically, while you're away from lane, your ADC can play patiently because the wave is coming into them. They don't have to walk up to CS, as it'll all eventually get to them. This is why the #1 roam timer for supports is almost always after crashing a wave and recalling. When you crash a wave, the wave will always bounce back towards your ADC. So after basing, you're almost always able to roam. It doesn't mean there isn't any risk though, as per this example. So after basing here, Nautilus follows the rule we just discussed. He looks at the lane and is definitely going to push back into his ADC, so she'll be able to play safe. When he gets to mid though, we can discuss a problem you need to tackle. This play onto the enemy Malzahar is not very likely to work. Once Nautilus gives up, he looks at bottom. Kai'Sa just barely dodged an engage. She should have been much further back. Before roaming like this, you really have to ask yourself, what are the chances that this roam works? And based on how my ADC has played so far, how likely is it that they won't die while I'm away? While technically this was a fine roam by Nautilus, in this game, he should have probably just went bottom. There was no kill opportunity in mid, and his ADC was clearly an impatient player. Before every roam, always ask yourself how likely you are to get a kill and how dangerous it is to leave your ADC alone. The best roams in low elo are high probability kills with zero risks to your ADC, like this other game. After basing, Nautilus is pathing back bottom with his ADC. However, he notices that the Caitlyn and Karma both recalled, so there's zero risk to leaving his Ashe alone at the moment. Not only that, but the enemy mid laner is a squishy mage, and his Veigar has very deadly follow-up. This is the perfect type of roam for low elo. Nautilus flashes in, and they score an easy kill. So just keep that in mind every time you play. Always weigh the rewards versus the risk of your ADC dying, and you'll be a much better roamer instantly. Moving on, at some point you'll unlock your support item and get 3 wards whenever you base. At this point in the game, you've got a very important goal you should want to achieve. Do not be selfish and only place your vision around bot lane to keep you and your ADC safe. This is pretty wasteful. You ideally want to find a timing to move towards mid lane and to place 1 or 2 wards in the general area. So why should this matter to you? For starters, you don't need 3 wards to keep yourself safe in bot. You can definitely make do with 1 or 2. So warding for mid lane is just a nice thing to do. You want to keep your ADC and your other carries safe at the same time, which you can easily achieve most games. More importantly, it also spots potential roams from the enemy mid laner way before you're in any danger. Why spot the roam at the last minute when you can spot it 20 seconds in advance? Likewise, it gives your own mid laner the confidence to face check the river and potentially roam towards your lane as well. So you're both preventing enemy roams and enabling your own teammate to roam instead. The final reason that you want to place some wards in mid as often as possible is that it's obviously in the middle of the map. Mid has by far the biggest traffic out of every lane, as supports and junglers are constantly pathing through or around the area. The value of mid lane wards cannot be understated, as they will just give you way more information than any other wards in the game. Here's a perfect example of what we mean. In this game, Nautilus made it a big deal to place wards around the jungle, very close to mid lane. He's going to get payoff for this nearly instantly. As Viego passed through this jungle, one of those wards near mid spots him. Now all 5 members of Nautilus' team know that Viego is on blue buff. Of course, it doesn't end there. They even spot Viego going into the river thanks to another of the wards Nautilus placed earlier. Veigar and Ashe have so much vision and are aware enough to rotate over. Thanks to that, they score an easy pick with all the information that Nautilus provided. So to make it clear, place 1 to 2 wards every time you base in one of these areas for your mid laners. You'll make the game much easier to play for both you and your teammates, and will likely result in winning the laning phase way more often. Before we end the lane phase, there's one final thing many players want to learn about. How do you help secure Dragon as a support? Here's where we tell you how you should buy control wards and to establish vision control of the area. This will allow you and your teammates to use a timing window where you all have priority to rotate over and secure the dragon as a team. This will guarantee that your team takes the objective with no risk and lets you start stacking dragons for Dragon Soul. Yeah, no, that's a load of barnacles. That'll never happen, right? You want to know the real way to get dragon? Here's how. If you're winning lane, you and your team will probably be able to take it whenever you want. If you're losing lane, then the enemy team gets dragon. That's it. Trying to coordinate priority, vision, and working together for this objective is a massive headache that is not worth stressing over as a support. Just focus on winning lane and dragons will come naturally because the enemy team just won't be able to contest it. Don't overthink it and overforce some coordinated play that will never work, especially in lower elo brackets. Now that we're done with the laning phase, what happens in the mid game? What should you be doing and what are your main goals? First, let's start with how things should technically go if players are playing properly. Ideally, your top and mid laners are the ones who take over farming side lane waves. This is because you want your ADC and support in mid lane. It's the safest role in the game at this point, which allows a marksman to farm relatively safely. Not only that, but as a support, being mid lane gives you direct access to both objectives, so you can ward either of them fairly easily. That's on top of the fact that supports should be rotating to most of the skirmishes that begin to happen in the jungle or side lanes. Being in mid allows you to do that as quickly and reliably as possible. Of course, that's not going to happen all that often. People from both teams are going to be all over the place. Solo queue is chaos, so how do you know what to do at all times if there's no order to things? Keep in mind, everything we're about to discuss is just general guidelines. There's no set of rules for what you should be doing, as every game is wildly different. However, these guidelines will typically work out in a lot of cases and help you gain consistent results. We're going to talk about this tip first because it basically trumps any other guidelines we're going to discuss in a moment. If you have someone who's really fed, just play around them. Now, this doesn't mean that you just sit in lane with them and literally never leave their side. This is what bad supports do. They just follow someone and never leave them alone. If you just hold someone's hand the entire time, you're just making the game harder for your team. One, you're telling the enemy team where you are at all times. This gives them crucial information for free. Two, sitting in a lane with a teammate just shares their gold and experience. You want to help your fed member pop off, not make it harder for them to do so. Here's a pretty good example of what this looks like. Coming out of base, Nautilus presses tab and sees that his Gangplank is a massive carry right now. This doesn't mean that Naut just goes bottom to push with GP. One of the best and simplest things you can do is to just begin warding for them. So Naut immediately goes to set up a ward that spots rotations from mid to bot. Then he starts pathing towards GP to do what is known as shadowing. Shadowing means that you're not actually next to your teammate. You're either hiding in bushes behind them or towards the side. This way, if they get collapsed on, you come out and help them turn the fight. Nautilus planned to shadow in this brush next to the tower. Unfortunately, he's spotted coming in. Not a big deal though, this is where the value in playing around fed members comes in. Nautilus knows he can just fight with his Gangplank and he's likely to win, so he just slams his ultimate, makes a fight happen, and they get 2 kills off it. Supporting and being in the general area of your fed members is one of the easiest ways to win. However, you're not always going to have a super fed member to play off of. So what then? The biggest thing we notice is that support players will just follow their ADC around no matter what. This Lulu is just randomly following her Lucian to watch him farm a single bot lane wave. It's actually crazy what we watch players do sometimes. Meanwhile, a huge fight breaks out in mid, which Lulu should have definitely been a part of. As a support, you're typically just going to be staying around the mid lane area most of the time. As we already discussed, this lets you get the best vision possible, but it also lets you respond to most of the random fights that are going to happen in solo queue. If your ADC is pushing off a side lane or something, let them do it. You can't just babysit them the whole game. You have to trust that they're pushing for a reason and that they'll probably be fine on their own. You're the support for the whole team, not just the marksman. Okay, so as we discussed, you're in mid lane for a reason. It's got the best access to everywhere on the map, which brings us to our most important concept for the mid game. You should be the first one to most plays before anyone else. Every other lane needs to react to the happenings of the map, while also picking up jungle camps and minion waves. But obviously as a support, you don't have to farm. You don't have any big responsibilities and can be wherever you want to be at all times. When it comes to objectives, the general advice players give is always to try to be there 30 seconds before it even spawns. But your 4 teammates have other duties, like fixing waves, trying to complete an item before the fight, or defending a tower. However, you don't have to do any of that. While all of your teammates can't follow the general rule of being 30 seconds early to an objective, you almost always can. Which means that when you see an objective spawning, you should already be in the area setting up vision. You can see that Vayne is here with Morgana, but Wukong and Akali are lagging behind a little as they were busy. That's fine though, because Morgana has already established control over the area with vision. This makes it very difficult for the enemy team if they were to choose to contest, since they'd be walking into Fog of War and be at a massive disadvantage. With control over the area, Dragon is all but guaranteed, and Morgana even manages to set up a pick on the Katarina, who was walking by on top of that. This same concept applies to basically every other decision you'll be making. While your teammates are busy farming, if you see a potential play on the map, you should be the first one to rotate over. Here's an example. While your other teammates were mid farming waves, Karma noticed the enemy K'Sante over pushing top. She's the first one there, and now she can just stall while her teammates get here to finish him off. Support macro is honestly pretty easy and not something to overthink. You generally settle around mid lane most of the time, and then you just react to the random fights that happen all around you, and then just be at objectives before anyone else. And if you see any potential plays anywhere on the map, then react instantly. Your job is to just be proactive and to get to plays and objectives quickly, unlike other roles. Just like this Leona, she saw a play happening up top and moved up there ASAP to help. Now, the one big responsibility you do have is vision. Where do you put your wards, and how do you put them there without dying? Let's break that down. First things first, your wards will almost always go around the area or objective that you're contesting. So right now, the current objective on the map being contested is Rift Herald, right? So Karma is naturally in the area and just placing vision down to make sure this goes smoothly. There's not much else to this than that. However, now we get into the concept of deep versus shallow vision. This is a pretty self-explanatory concept. Shallow wards are ones that you place very close to the safety of the side of the map that you control. These types of wards are usually placed when you don't feel comfortable going into the enemy's jungle to ward any further up. Shallow vision is still good, but it does have a slight drawback. It doesn't give you or your teammates much time to react to enemy actions. By the time you see a play coming, it might be too late to react to in a lot of cases. Therefore, as a support, your main goal is to establish deep vision whenever you can. This just means venturing further into the enemy territory to place wards. So the weakness of shallow wards was that you can't see enemy plays coming until they're basically already happening, right? Well, deep wards let you see enemy movement way before they've committed to a play. This lets you either avoid their attack or counter it with your own play way more consistently. See how Pyke has already established all this deep vision from earlier? Now he and his team can precisely see how the enemy team is trying to collapse into their own jungle. This allows Pyke and his team to dismantle them easily, as they knew exactly what the enemy team was up to already. You can easily win a game with just a few deep wards. The obvious drawback is that placing deep vision is fairly dangerous, especially when none of your teammates will help you consistently do it. So here's how you can get it on your own. Pay close attention to the map and who is showing on it. You can often find windows of opportunity to go for deep wards, even on squishy champions. For example, Janna sees Nocturne and Skarner are dead. She also sees that Sivir and Pyke are bottom. Likewise, Ahri is busy farming top lane waves, so she can move into the enemy jungle with no fear and place a pretty nice ward. Alright, let's round things out with 3 quick tips that you can immediately start implementing as a support. For starters, did you know that towers actually get tankier when turret plates go down based on how many players are in the area? Take a look. When Caitlyn takes this turret plate with just 1 dummy around, it goes up to 100 armor. When she takes it with 2 dummies around, it gains up to 145 armor. So in this particular case, you can see Nautilus hang back as his Ashe takes a tower. Your autos do like 30 damage. It's not worth hitting it with your ADC a lot of the time. Not only would he potentially make Ashe deal less damage, but he'd also be sharing some of her gold. Most engaged supports don't scale that well with items, so taking some of the gold away from your ADC while making a tower harder to take is doubly as bad. For caster supports though, hitting towers with your ADC is generally fine. At the very least, you can actually earn extra gold this way since you proc Spell Thieves on a tower, letting you complete your support item faster. Not only that though, but caster supports tend to scale very well as the game goes on, so sharing gold with their ADC isn't nearly as bad as it is on melee supports. For our second tip, since you buy a ton of control wards and get sweeper, you will be in charge of denying a ton of vision. If you don't know, the person who reveals a ward should always let their teammates kill it. That's because you will still earn the same amount of gold even when someone else takes the last hit. Basically, you're doubling the amount of gold earned on every ward kill by letting someone else take it. Finally, don't be afraid to base just for wards. As you place vision around the map, you may find yourself out of ward charges. If you think that nothing is going to happen anytime soon, then feel free to quickly base and restock on vision even if you got nothing great to buy. Finding opportunities to base like this is really good and will give you way more wards to play with. Alright guys, that is everything you need to know to begin out macroing every other support you're against. For everything else, there's skillcapped.com. It's the fastest way to climb and get the rank you've always wanted. We take the highest priority skills you need to learn to climb ranks fast, such as wave control, and then break it down into a step-by-step course of bite-sized 1 to 2 minute videos that are easy to understand. So while you wait for your next game to start, you can learn freezing, fast pushing, slow pushing, bouncing waves, the list goes on, all in just a few minutes to maximize your improvement rate. These courses have been getting 5-star ratings from all of our users, raving at how helpful they are. That's not all though, as every week we release 10 brand new Smurf commentaries where a challenger player teaches you how to climb out of the exact rank you're stuck in. If you're looking for something more personal instead, then we've got you covered with one-on-one coaching from our trained challenger experts. All this seems too good to be true? Well, don't worry, we're backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using SkillCapped, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Click the link in the description below and get the rank you always wanted. Alright, that's a wrap on this one guys. We here at SkillCapped want to thank you all for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.